My phone buzzed at exactly 7:12 a.m. I remember the time because the numbers burned into my brain the way weird moments do, the kind you shouldn't remember but somehow always do. I was still half asleep when I slid my hand across the nightstand and squinted at the screen. It was my dad calling, not texting, calling, and he never called. I answered with that dry morning voice nobody wants to admit is real. Hello? Grandpa died last night, my father said, flat and cold like he was reading a weather update. Funeral's Friday. Hope you can make it. And then click. No pause, no follow-up, no, are you okay? Nothing. I sat up in bed, staring at the blank screen like maybe it would explain itself. Grandpa died. Friday. And apparently that was that. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel shock, just this weird numbness sitting behind my ribs. Grandpa and I hadn't been close in years, not since before the family fallout I still don't fully understand. It was one of those stories where people stopped talking and nobody ever bothered to explain why. I was 16 the last time I saw him. I'm 27 now. I rolled out of bed and padded into the kitchen. The apartment felt quieter than usual, like it somehow heard the news too and didn't know what to say. I poured coffee and leaned against the counter, staring at the steam lifting like smoke from a small fire. My mind jumped between memories like someone flipping pages in an old diary. Grandpa's workshop, the candy jar he kept hidden from my grandmother, the way he called me Ace for reasons I never understood. My phone buzzed again, this time a text. From Mom. Dad told you about Grandpa. We'll talk later. That was it. My mom always lived in half sentences. I could imagine her clutching her mug, pacing the living room, rehearsing words she probably never say. Around noon, she finally called. How are you, sweetheart? I don't know, I told her. It's weird. I haven't seen him in forever. I know, she whispered, and that was the first crack in her voice. Things got complicated. Complicated was an understatement. Our family specialized in secrets and distance. We didn't scream, we didn't fight, we just disappeared from each other quietly, one by one. Mom told me the funeral was in our old town, 3 hours north. Your father wants you to ride with us, she said, and I laughed out loud. Oh, does he? He thinks it would look better, she added carefully, like better was something fragile. For who? I asked. She hesitated. For the family. The same family that stopped sending Christmas cards when I moved out after college. The same family that pretended I didn't exist when I told them I wasn't coming home for holidays anymore. The same family that once made Grandpa choose between sides, though I never figured out what sides those were. I told her I'd drive myself. The days before Friday felt unreal. I kept replaying tiny flashes of childhood, crickets humming outside Grandpa's porch, the smell of his pipe tobacco, the way his eyes smiled before his mouth did. I remembered one summer he taught me how to replace a spark plug, and then told me girls should know how to fix things so they never had to depend on anyone. I didn't know if he meant that as empowerment or a warning. Friday came too fast. I drove up early, hoping to avoid awkward conversations in the parking lot. The funeral home was beige and forgettable, the kind of place that looks designed for holding grief in a straight line. When I walked in, heads turned, not slowly, not dramatically, just enough for me to feel like a stranger who stumbled into a private club. My father approached first. He looked older than I remembered, more tired, like life had sanded him down. You made it, he said, like attendance was a test I almost failed. I told Mom I would, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. He nodded once and gestured to the front of the room. Viewing is over there. I didn't move. I just stared at the casket. It was darker than anything Grandpa ever owned. He'd always liked lighter woods, oak and birch, and things that looked alive. I wondered who chose it. My brother Ethan walked up behind me and nudged my shoulder. Hey, Ace, he whispered. I froze. Don't call me that. Sorry, he murmured, and his face collapsed into something genuinely sad. I just thought, "I know," I said, but my voice was smaller than I meant. My Aunt Margaret hugged me like it was an apology she'd been waiting to deliver. My Uncle Rick didn't hug me at all. He just stared, eyes narrow, lips thin, like he'd been collecting opinions about me for years, and today he finally got to deliver the verdict. During the service, I couldn't cry. I scanned the room instead, studying expressions like they were clues to a puzzle I still didn't have the edges for. Mom dabbed her eyes, Ethan swallowed hard, and Dad sat stiff and unmoved, like grief was an inconvenience. When the pastor started talking about legacy and family, my stomach twisted. Legacy implied closeness. Ours was miles wide and decades deep. After the burial, people drifted towards the reception hall. I stayed back, staring at the headstone as the crowd thinned. "Hey, Ethan," said quietly when he came back for me. "You good?" "I don't know," I whispered. "I feel like I missed something, or maybe everyone hid it from me." His jaw flexed. "Yeah, about that." I turned. "About what?" He looked over his shoulder like he wasn't sure if Dad was close. "I need to tell you something. Mom said not to, Dad definitely doesn't want to, but Grandpa asked me to." My pulse stuttered. "What?" I asked. "Not here," he said. "I'll drive behind you." I didn't speak the whole drive to the reception. My brain was racing in a dozen directions. Inheritance, secrets, old feuds, medical stuff, letters written and never sent. The way Grandpa always hesitated before saying goodbye that last summer. At the reception, people were already eating. Sandwich trays, fruit platters, and those tiny cookies that crumble as soon as you touch them. My relatives chatted like this was a reunion, not a funeral. Then I saw him, Dad, laughing, actually laughing, like he was the one who delivered the coldest news of my life 3 days earlier. I felt my chest heat up with something sharp and resentful. Mom noticed me staring. "He's handling it in his own way," she whispered. "Was he close to him at the end?" I asked. Mom blinked twice, hesitated, then said, "It's complicated." Everything in my family was always complicated. Ethan pulled me toward an empty corner. "Okay," he said, lowering his voice. "You need to know. Grandpa wanted you to have something, but Dad didn't want to tell you." My heart kicked. "Why?" I asked. "Because it would change everything, and because he always hated how close you were to Grandpa." I waited. He swallowed. "It's about the shop and the house and something else." My mouth went dry. "What something else?" He looked me right in the eyes. "You're not going to believe me until I show you." And just like that, all the numbness inside me cracked open, because of course Grandpa didn't just die and leave quietly. Of course something was buried under years of silence and distance. Of course Dad would rather swallow his own tongue than let me know. And I wasn't sure what scared me more, the secrets themselves or the parts of me that already suspected them. The reception hall buzzed with that strange mix of sorrow and small talk that only happens after funerals. I watched my cousins laugh about some story from middle school while my aunt refilled her wine glass for the 3rd time, her mascara already smudged beneath the corners of her eyes. Grief made everyone behave like caricatures of themselves. Ethan motioned toward the kitchen door. No one was paying attention, not even Dad, who was surrounded by relatives like a politician working a donor room. The way he held his shoulders back, chin up, eyes narrowed, it wasn't grief, it was performance. When the door swung shut behind us, Ethan exhaled and leaned against a stainless steel prep counter. "You remember Grandpa's workshop?" he asked. I nodded. Of course, smelled like sawdust and lacquer and whatever pipe tobacco he smoked. "Yeah," Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "He never sold it, not the workshop, not the house. Dad told everyone he did, said he needed the money for retirement." My mouth parted. "Wait, what? Why would he lie?" "Because it wasn't his to sell," Ethan whispered. "Grandpa signed it over years ago, before he got sick." The air went thin around me. "To who?" I asked. You, he said. I stared at him like he had just told me the moon was an inheritance too. No, why would he? Because you were the only one who visited, Ethan cut in, even when Dad told you not to, even when Mom said it would make things worse. He never forgot that. I felt suddenly 14 again, standing in Grandpa's workshop while Dad yelled from the driveway for me to get in the car. We don't do split loyalty in this house, he'd snapped. Except I never knew what loyalty I was splitting. I pushed my fingers through my hair. Does Dad know? Oh yeah, Ethan chuckled darkly. He's known for years, and he hates it. My stomach twisted. So what's the catch? There's more, he said. Grandpa didn't just leave you the house. There's a trust, and files, and letters, and something about the land. The land. I hadn't even considered the land. Grandpa's property backed into woods that felt endless when I was little, acres of trees and creek beds and old stone walls that looked like they belonged to someone a century ago. I leaned closer. How do you know all this? Ethan tapped his chest. Because he made me promise to tell you if Dad tried to bury it. He didn't want it lost. Why tell me now? I whispered. Because he's gone, and because Dad already started making calls. My pulse thudded. What calls? Surveyors, developers, it's all hush-hush. He wants to flip it before paperwork catches up. Jesus, I breathed. He doesn't even have rights to it. Exactly. So we need to go, today. I blinked. What do you mean, go? To the house, the shop, the files, everything's still there. A burst of laughter echoed from the hall. We both looked toward the door. The sound felt wrong, too bright, too careless. Does Mom know? I asked. Enough, he said, but she's afraid of Dad. She won't say anything in front of him. I swallowed hard. Does anyone else know? Ethan's eyes darted toward the doorway. Aunt Margaret suspects. Uncle Rick definitely does. And if Rick knows, then Dad knows he knows. And that means he's panicking. I felt adrenaline warming my skin, crawling up my spine. We should leave, I whispered. Right now, Ethan nodded. But before we could move, the kitchen door slammed open, and Aunt Margaret slipped inside, shutting it quickly behind her. There you two are, she hissed. Your father's looking for you. Ethan stiffened. Why? Because Rick told him. I clenched my jaw. What told him? Margaret looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her before, fear mixed with urgency. That you know, she whispered, about the house, about the papers, about the trust. My heartbeat was pounding now. So what? It's mine. She grabbed my hand, cold fingers pressing tight. Sweetheart, you don't understand. It's not just the house, it's the land. The company wants the land. What company? I demanded. Margaret swallowed. Arbotech. I went still. Arbotech wasn't just a company. It was one of the biggest timber and development firms in the state. They didn't buy land, they consumed it. But why would they? Because there's mineral rights involved, she murmured. Grandpa found out years ago. He was trying to protect it. The room tilted. Mineral rights? I whispered. To what? I don't know, she said, but I know this. If your father gets there first, it's over for all of us. Ethan and I exchanged a look. We're going, he said. Margaret nodded once. Go through the back. Take my car. Your father won't expect that. Just before we slipped out the rear exit, Margaret squeezed my hand again. You were always his favorite, and not for the reason you think. The sky outside was a flat winter gray, heavy, low, and impatient. We ducked behind a row of SUVs and climbed into Margaret's dusty silver sedan. As soon as the doors shut, Ethan hit the gas and the engine growled awake. I stared at the funeral home entrance. A few silhouettes moved behind the doors, shadows pacing, searching. Do you think Dad knows we're leaving? I asked. Oh yeah, Ethan muttered, but he has no idea how much we know. He hit the gas. Where are we going first? I asked. The workshop, he said. Grandpa left something there with your name on it. Something with my name on it, something he didn't want Dad to touch, something he trusted only me with. As the funeral home shrank in the rearview mirror, I realized something I hadn't understood until that moment. Grandpa wasn't done speaking. He just waited until everyone stopped listening. The roads toward Grandpa's land hadn't changed in years. Narrow country ribbons of asphalt cutting through fields and old fences where rusted barbed wire curled like dead vines. I watched the trees whip past, bare branches clawing at the sky. Winter in this part of Pennsylvania always felt like a warning. Ethan didn't speak for a while, just drummed his fingers on the wheel and kept glancing at the rearview mirror. I pretended not to notice, but every time he checked it, my chest tightened a little more. When we finally turned onto the gravel driveway, the workshop came into view. Slanted roof, peeling green paint, a single porch light he always left on, even when he wasn't home. Grandpa used to say the light wasn't for him, it was for whoever might need to find their way one night. I never asked who that was. Ethan killed the engine. "You ready?" he asked. "Not even a little," I said. "But go." The workshop door opened with the same creak I remembered. It smelled like cedar, grease, and pipe smoke, the scent I thought I'd forgotten. Dust motes swirled through slanted beams of pale sunlight. It looked like Grandpa had stepped out an hour ago. Ethan walked straight toward the back wall and lifted a canvas tarp, revealing a heavy tool chest. "Here," he said, tugging at the middle drawer until it clicked. Inside was a weathered metal lockbox, army green, dented at the corner. My name was on a strip of masking tape, 4L. My throat tightened as I lifted it. "It's locked," I whispered. "Key's here," Ethan said, tapping the underside of the drawer. The key fit like it had been waiting decades for that exact moment. When the lock snapped open, Ethan exhaled. Inside were envelopes, folded maps, deeds, old photographs, and something I didn't expect, 2 USB drives sealed in plastic. Grandpa barely trusted microwaves, let alone flash storage. That alone told me whatever was on them mattered. I picked up one envelope. It felt thick and heavy, the way legal documents feel before someone breaks your life open. My name was written in the same shaky handwriting Grandpa had in his last years. Before I could open it, tires crackled on gravel outside. Ethan froze. "We weren't followed," he whispered. "No," I breathed, "but someone knew we'd come." Voices, 2 men, 1 woman. Low, clipped, professional. Not family. Ethan peeked through the burlap curtains. Black SUV, 3 of them. Not Dad. Developers? I guessed. Or lawyers, he murmured. Or both. Someone knocked on the workshop door, not a polite knock, the kind designed to remind you they could break the door down if they wanted to. "Ms. Langford," a male voice called, calm, too calm. "We'd like to speak with you regarding your grandfather's estate." Estate. They said the word like they were talking about stocks or a portfolio, and not the creek where I learned to skip stones, or the woods where I carved my initials into an oak tree. Ethan mouthed, "Don't answer." The door rattled again, harder this time. "We know you're in there," the voice added, "and we know what you're holding." I looked down at the box in my lap. They knew. Of course they knew. A woman's voice joined in, smooth as polished glass. "There are companies and very serious interests involved here. Delay only complicates things for you and for your family." My family? I wondered if they meant Dad, or if they meant something much bigger. Ethan motioned toward the back exit, but before we could move, the woman said, "There are mineral rights, Ms. Langford, rights that were never meant to be tied to a single private owner." My pulse thudded in my ears. They weren't bluffing. They knew everything. Ethan whispered, "We're leaving, now." He grabbed the box while I snatched the envelopes and maps. We slipped through the rear door and sprinted across the yard toward the tree line. I half waited for shouted commands or the snap of a gunshot, but instead their voices stayed calm. They didn't need to chase us. They already expected this part. Once we reached the woods, breath steaming in the cold, Ethan slowed. "They'll circle around. They'll try to intercept at the house." "We go through the creek," I said. "They can't get SUVs through there." The creek was shallow in winter, just wet enough to make rocks slippery and cold enough to bite through leather boots. We crossed fast, leaving no clear footprints on the opposite bank. When we finally reached the house, Grandpa's single-story ranch, sun was starting to dip behind the pines. The
The place looked unchanged, like time was scared to touch it after he died. Ethan jimmied the back door with a key hidden under a rock shaped like a turtle. Grandpa's idea of security was optimism. Inside, the heat was off and everything was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear my own pulse in my teeth. "Check his study," Ethan said. I opened the envelope as I walked, unfolding crisp legal paper with the trust title on top. Page after page, mineral rights, land surveys, transfers, restrictions, contiguous territory, but then a line that made me stop breathing. Estimated reserves pending geological confirmation. Reserves. Not timber, not water. Something underground. Oil? Gas? Lithium? Something worse? Something bigger. Before I reached the study, someone knocked on the front door. Not them. A different knock, hesitant, uneven. I motioned for Ethan to stay back, then peeked through the peer hole. Dad. Standing alone in the fading light. No SUV, no lawyers, no audience. Just him. His voice sounded small through the wood. "Open the door, kiddo." Kiddo, a word he hadn't used since before the yelling, before the orders, before everything cold between us started to calcify. I opened the door just enough to see his face. His eyes flicked to the papers in my hand. "So," he said, exhaling, "I guess he told you." Silence stretched between us like a wire pulled tight. "Why didn't you?" I asked. Dad looked past me into the house like he expected Grandpa to be sitting in the recliner with a beer and a smirk. "Because you wouldn't have listened," he said. "You never did when it came to him." I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was pathetic. "You're wrong," I said. "I listened to him more than anyone." Dad nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer his whole life. Then he stepped back. "Those people you just ran from," he said, "they're not the only ones coming." My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means, Dad's voice trembled for the first time in decades, you have no idea what Grandpa was protecting, and you're running out of time to decide what to do with it. Before I could speak, headlights rolled into the driveway. Not one car, 3. Dad looked at them, then at me. "Whatever happens next," he whispered, "don't assume I'm your enemy." But he didn't say he was on my side either. He walked toward the cars, hands up, not surrender, not compliance, something in between. Ethan joined me at the doorway, breath fogging in the cold air. "What now?" he asked. I tightened my grip on the papers and the box, heart pounding like a war drum. "I guess we find out what's worth dying for." And I didn't close the door. Not yet. Not with the headlights stealing the daylight and the future knocking harder than the past ever did. Like, subscribe, please.